already gone into them. All I have done is created the outer packaging, but it is up to them how they interpret it. I have left them to their own devices, but I control it completely. Then he began to tell me the first time they were ever able to go anywhere in time, they came to that point of seeing their leader standing in the place as the winner. Because it is the future, they now have a complete blueprint or a recipe of what to do and what not to do to bring this scenario about as a reality. They have to stick to this in every little tiny detailed point, going all the way back to the fall in the Garden of Eden. They cannot deviate from it, and they know that they cannot travel beyond that point because somehow time ends also, as the Bible says in Revelation 13. They're locked into us. Even if they hear me now talking and explaining to this, they are still locked into this as their only hope in their delusion to think they can beat God at his own game. God is in complete control. Even the grandfather paradox is not a problem with God. That is why many things cannot be changed, and if you tried, you would only be a part of how it was supposed to happen in the first place. Even the theoretical physicists have considered this problem as already possibly being solved.
But suppose a time traveler can land in the past without the constant repetition. In that case, there are other roadblocks. The most perplexing are the inconsistencies or paradoxes that pop up when we start meddling with the past.
A famous example of the kind of inconsistency you can get with time travel is called the grandfather paradox. And this is where someone goes back to the time of, for example, their grandfather. So imagine that I go back in time with a time machine and meet my grandfather in 1937. He's just about to go on a blind date with my grandmother. They've never met before. But actually, I convince him not to go on that date. He's actually interested in the races, and so I tell him that there's an exciting race with Seabiscuit that's coming up at the Santa Anita track. And so we go off together to that race. He never meets my grandmother. So what happens to me? How is it possible that I could have been born and then been able to go back in time, meet him, and stop myself from being born? So there's an example of an inconsistency. It's a loop in time that really doesn't make sense.
But if time travel is possible, nature must have a way around the contradiction.
One thing that physicists are quite certain of is that the universe ultimately makes sense.
In all of physics and all of science more generally, consistency, self-consistency, common sense, if you like, is something that is a fundamental principle.
Physicists have come up with at least 3 ways that nature might act to prevent time travel paradoxes. The first is simple. Nature prevents paradoxes by making time travel into the past impossible. In other words, it can't be done. A different alternative is the strange idea of multiple universes.
One way of dealing with travel back in time is to say that you actually enter a different parallel universe after having made the journey back in time. So you don't affect the history of the universe from which you came. In effect, anything that can happen will happen. But the way it happens is by entering.
That's one small step for man, one giant. I have a dream. Power to the people. Power to the people. Oh, my.